Money laundering, a practice rooted in history that continues to be a significant global concern today. Typically, money is laundered for one of three reasons: financing terrorism, drug trafficking, and tax evasion. The launderers will look to move these illicit funds through a couple of ways: storing these funds in an offshore bank account, using it to gamble and legitimize the funds through their declared winnings, or purchase assets like property, luxury items such as cars, watches, and designer bags. According to the International Monetary Fund, it is estimated that about $800 billion to $2 trillion is laundered annually. Even if a fraction of that were to be laundered within a country, surely it would be easily detected. Why would governments then allow such huge sums of illegal funds to be circulating within their economy?
You're dealing with rich people. You're going to go out and accuse rich people of doing illicit activities. You better have all your facts correct before you go after people who are very rich, very powerful.
Why has money laundering thrived for so long, and what is the cost of a country attempting to stamp out these unclean funds?
This thing is happening all over the world. I mean, obviously, money laundering is a very old business. Benefits could be that it can have a positive effect on the GDP. You look at countries that have used this as a means to kind of grow.
Countries like Cyprus, Spain, or the UAE offer citizenship by investment. This means that anyone can invest a certain amount in order to attain permanent citizenship. The country will then benefit from foreign direct investment. But this scheme could also expose the country to the risk of attracting individuals who are linked to crime and attempting to legitimize their funds. Every year, about 50,000 people get a second citizenship via this route. The golden passport industry itself is estimated at roughly $21.4 billion, and by 2025, it will generate about $100 billion in revenue for nations benefiting from it. The huge inflow of capital would mean a boost in the country's economic activity. With an astounding $815 billion of GDP in 2023, Switzerland still seems to be thriving economically despite having a reputation as a haven to store large sums of money with unclear origins.
I'm curious about your bank secrecy laws here.
The only way the Banque Reale de Genève would cooperate with a foreign legal body is if the crime being pursued is also a crime in Switzerland. From a financial standpoint, you are now in heaven.
But just over on the other end of the world lies the Switzerland of Asia. Singapore has spent decades building their reputation as the region's financial hub. The country keeps the economy open to inflow of capital, but maintains the public stance of being strict with regulatory standards. But why do both financial hubs have such different stands on their regulations?
The difference between Switzerland and Singapore is vast, because Switzerland has been in this game for a very, very long time. Switzerland has kind of divided their banking system into two groups. One is these large banks that are internationally active, which are controlled and regulated internationally. And those banks have said, look, we have nothing to do with money laundering and we will not accept any money that we cannot do due diligence on this funds. But there are boutique banks in Switzerland that do not have to go through KYC, AML procedures. So they are happy to take this money and park it in their banking system. Then they take these funds and use them to lend out for commercial purposes and earn a high return on this money. But it's a double-edged sword. It hurts your reputation. If you think about Cayman Islands and many other countries like Bahamas, they also specialize in creating shell companies and allowing money laundering, but they create a bad reputation for those countries.
The billion-dollar money laundering case in Singapore is raising questions about how illicit activity like this could have slipped under the country's radar. It's also casting a spotlight on how robust Singapore's safeguards are.
So it's not a foolproof system. You try to make the system as good as possible. The good thing is when things kind of squeak through and you find out, you take action immediately.
We will not hesitate to take strong enforcement action against people who would use Singapore as a haven to launder proceeds of crime. We will deal with them and their ill-gotten gains to the fullest extent of our laws.
There was no shortage in headlines illustrating just how massive this case was, both locally and globally.
They want to write that Singapore's image will be tarnished. I would argue it's just the opposite, that it will restore and show that Singapore, once it found out, it took quick actions. It created an interagency task force. The central bank took immediate action. Whereas which other country has done anything? There's a lot of talk, but there's no action. Now, obviously, this is a big amount. That may be the biggest amount for Singapore or the world, but I think we should put this in perspective. If we put the 2.8 billion against what we have not caught in Switzerland and in other countries, then this is peanuts.
So if there are proven cases of other financial hubs allowing these kinds of activity to thrive within the system, why is there still a need for Singapore to be clean?
I think Singapore's view is that we'd rather be clean than bring in dirty money into Singapore. So even if that actually stops inflow of some of these family offices or illicit funds coming into Singapore, my impression is Singapore is happy with that outcome, because for them the image matters much more than the marginal effect it could have on economic growth. Singapore's economy is around $600 billion a year. All of this illicit funds that we are talking about $2 billion. So it's 1 day of GDP. You'd rather sacrifice that 1 day of GDP than sacrifice a squeaky clean image.